The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay. Okay, does everybody see the right screen? Good. Okay, it's 8:30. Thank you everyone so much for coming. It is great to see so many of you here. I'm really excited to see so many people who are interested in coming to an event like this and talking about languages, which is of course our topic for today. So first of all, I think it's important to explain who I am, what we're talking about, and why I'm giving this webinar. So my name is Alex Rawlings, as you know. I am now 23 years old. I've studied 15 languages in my life, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my story and how I have learned so many languages, and importantly, why I have learned so many languages. The point of this webinar is not for you to find out a lot about me necessarily, but to find out also something about you, because I want to talk to you about how my methods and my ideas about language learning are also useful for you, for your students, for your teachers, for anybody you know that wants to learn languages. So what's going to happen today is that I'm going to show you a little presentation, and I'm going to talk to you like this about my story, about my ideas, and then at the end we're going to have about 10 minutes for you to ask any questions that you still have, because like I said, the point of coming together today is to help, to share stories, to share inspiration, to share techniques. So if you can help me by also telling me what you would like to know about learning languages and how I can help you to learn better, then we're going to have a really, really good webinar. Like I said, there's been really big demand. We are at 100% capacity right now for the webinar. So it's very possible that we'll run something like this again in the near future if there's more questions, anything like that. So anything that comes to mind, just let me know. Okay, so as you can see a picture of me here on the screen, standing in front of the view of Budapest, which is the city where I live at the moment in Hungary. I've been here since August last year, and I will be staying until September. Now, what I've been doing here is I've been learning the Hungarian language. I've also been teaching. I teach intensive German courses, intensive Russian courses, and some English courses as well. And also, generally, I've been setting out on the first stage of my life after I left university, finishing studying, becoming an independent person. So these are all the kind of things that I do here. But of course, this is where I am now. This is not where I've always been. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how I got here. So this is me a few years ago, standing in front of the main library at Oxford University. Now, I went to Oxford University in 2010 to study modern languages. The languages that I studied were German, and I also studied beginner's Russian. So that meant that I studied Russian intensively for 1 year. Then immediately I went to Russia to live in a provincial town outside of Moscow for a whole other year with just the small amount of Russian that I learned to learn more and to become fluent in the language. I'm now very fluent in Russian. It's one of my best languages. Now, while I was at Oxford University, something very, very important happened in my life. Many of you may recognize this video, this picture of me standing in a playground with children running around talking in plenty of different languages about why I learn languages. This is a video that came out in 2012 with the BBC when I won a competition in the United Kingdom to find Britain's most multilingual student. I won this competition because I was tested for fluency in 11 different languages at the age of 20, which was the most out of anybody that they had in the competition. This was a couple of years ago, and as I say, this was a very life-changing moment for me because plenty of other things have happened to me since then that I never knew would happen before then. Now, of course, I'm no longer 20 years old. Life moves on. I am older. But I've also learned more languages as well, which is why the 11 languages number is something you may remember from seeing that video if you saw it. But we've moved on, and now I think I'm confident saying that I've learned about 15 languages, many of which I can speak fluently now. Now, since this video came out, I've been to a lot of different events for language learners, and I've also met a lot of other people around the world who learn languages. So this is a picture in the bottom left of me at a conference in New York. 2 years ago now, where I also met Tim Donor, who is another teenage polyglot from the United States who has a viral video on YouTube of him speaking 20 languages, age 16. I think maybe 6 million people or something have seen that. I met him at this event, and we're still in touch. We talk a lot about languages, and we're really good friends. And with us there as well is Professor Arguelles. Now, Professor Arguelles is another person who has learned a lot of languages. He speaks more like 40 or 50 languages, which he has learned fluently and very, very well. He's a university professor. He's not a young person like us, so he has had his whole life to actually learn these languages. But he's a very inspiring person for me and also for Tim to see what we could achieve in our lifetimes with languages. This was, of course, one of several events that I now go to talk about languages. I now travel all over the world to events, for example, the polyglot conferences that have taken place in Budapest, in Novi Sad, and this year in New York. I've also attended the Polyglot Gathering and spoken twice, which is the picture you can see at the bottom, where I've talked about, for example, techniques to do with learning languages through reading, and also my own experiences living in Hungary. I also regularly get invited to conferences in different places. So last month I was in Singapore talking at a teachers conference about multilingualism at an international school there. And I will also be traveling to the Czech Republic in October, just after New York, for another event to talk about languages. So this is what my life looks like right now, which is good because I actually really, really like traveling. I've visited now nearly 40 different countries. I've nearly filled my passport with 3 more years to go. And this, for me, is a very important part of learning languages. It's the ability to use them. When I was a student, when I was still, doing part-time jobs aside from my studies, I would try to save as much money as possible so that I could travel, so that I could visit new places, and of course so that I could use my languages. And that has been a really important motivating factor for me. And of course, the other thing that I do now is, along with Richard Simcott, who is another person who's very well known on YouTube for speaking a lot of languages. His number is more like 35, 40. I run a series of workshops called the Polyglot Workshops, where we talk in much more detail with very small groups of people that we select about how to learn languages, about techniques that you can use, ways to basically become a polyglot and to make your language learning much more efficient and much more satisfying. So that's my background. Now, the one thing that happens when I tell people about this, when I tell them I speak a lot of languages, is they ask me 2 questions. How and why? How have you learned so many languages? How did you do it? How did you find the strength? How did you find the time? But really, why? Why would you ever want to learn more than just one language? Or, in my country, the United Kingdom, most people don't even learn that. People just speak English and live their whole lives like that. So these are 2 very important questions. And because I get asked them very, very often, I've been able to think a lot about the kinds of answers that I would give. So for me, what is important is that how and why are almost the same question. Because in my opinion, if you know why you want to learn a language, then you will also find a way how. That's been my experience the whole way through learning, is that by knowing why, by choosing a language that I love, that I have a connection with, and that I really want to learn, I've found ways to do it that have been successful. So there are lots of reasons why you would want to learn individual languages, but there are also some very important reasons that motivate me to learn languages in general, to keep learning different languages and to keep up a fluency in not just 1 or 2 languages, but as many languages as I can. So let's talk a little bit about these now. Why did I want to learn so many languages? Well, frankly, languages for me, I think Katolom, the Hungarian polyglot who spoke 16 languages as an interpreter, she once said that languages are just about the only worth thing knowing, even badly. And I think it's such an inspiring quote to say that, because language for me is everything. Language is all about the living. It's about discovering the world, about understanding why we have differences, about communicating with people. And basically my dream always as a young child was that I wanted to be able to speak to anybody in the world, not just the people that I share a language with. So that means for me that English is not enough. Languages like Esperanto are not enough, because I really want to be able to connect with anyone. Of course, this is a very, very big goal. I don't think I'll ever be able to achieve it, but just the thought that, as many people as I can speak to in their own language, they can understand me, we can form a friendship and a relationship, is very, very inspiring for me and very, very motivating. And that's what keeps me going. But the other thing is that while that was my first thought, while that was what I initially wanted to do with languages, I got hooked. I caught the bug. Learning one language meant I wanted to learn a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, and so on, because learning so many languages taught me a lot of things about the world. It's completely changed the way that I live, and now I honestly cannot imagine living my life without speaking this number of languages and without planning to learn even more. One thing that I've learned is that all people in the world can be good. One of the biggest problems that we have is when people don't understand each other, when we have cultural differences, when we think that people are rude, when we think that people are aggressive. But learning different languages, being able to connect with people, not just through English or through gestures, I have learned that everybody in the world can be good, that there are just different ways of communicating with them. Different things mean different, different things you say, different things you do mean completely different things in different cultures. And speaking so many languages gives you a very special perspective on that, because it allows you to really appreciate, and learn a lot about humanity and about people. I also think that all languages in the world are beautiful and are worth learning. One thing that people told me a lot when I was younger is, why would you want to learn German? It's such an ugly language, etc., etc. Plus, of course, everybody in Germany speaks English. But I really don't agree with that. And actually, I believe every single language is beautiful. Every single language is worth looking at, because languages can express very different things, very different ideas in different ways that really can be surprising and almost inspiring as well. So for me, there is no such thing as a useless language and no such thing as an ugly language, just languages that I don't know yet. The other thing that I've discovered from speaking a lot of languages and, of course, traveling a lot is that until you learn to speak the language of a country you're visiting, you will never understand that country. I've had this experience where I visited countries without speaking the language and then gone back later when I can speak the language, and the difference has been amazing. Just being able to understand people on the bus, understand menus, understand conversations. It's been really, really interesting to see how much of a different experience you get when you speak the language. So I think to truly understand a country, to truly see it, you have to make that effort. And again, what really excites me is that every new language that you learn offers a completely different way in which to see the world. There's completely different perspectives, things that you would never have noticed before. Okay, so this is a big thing, actually. Do languages change the way you think? Do languages make you think differently? And what kind of things come up when one person speaks one language and one person speaks another? So we'll have a look at what I mean. Okay. So here we have a prism of colors, and I'd like to ask you a question, and maybe you could answer this. How many colors do you see? Just type it in the chat box how you've been doing it before. Tell me, how many colors do you see? Any number. Six, 9, 9, 8, 11, thousands, a lot, smile. Okay, even some longer numbers, gajillion. Okay, why do you think I'm asking this question? Is there an answer? Yes or no? What do you think? It depends. German is great, I agree. No, no. Okay, this is the thing. The answer is, the number of languages that you see here very much depends on what language you are speaking. So some languages have a lot of different words for colors. For example, the two different shades of blue in Russian would not be called two different shades of blue. They have different words for them, голубой and синий, which means that they would basically be two different colors, although in English we see them as one. Now, some languages, especially older languages, don't even have more than one word for a color, so they would only really see one color here. Does anyone know what color most languages would see? Red, exactly, because red is the one thing that really is a very striking color because it's the color of blood. Now, before we developed camera lenses, before we developed photography, most languages in the world did not have words for colors apart from red. And even if you still go to places like Australia and speak to Aboriginal people in their languages, often they maybe only have 2 or 3 different words for colors, even though in English we would see thousands of different colors. Now, this is just one example of how, because before I learned languages, I never even realized that what is one color to me, blue, is 2 colors for a Russian person. I never even thought about the different associations that there are. There's another little example as well. This is a picture story, and I want to tell you about a little experiment that happened where some linguists went to America, Israel, and Australia with this picture story, but not in order. And they asked the people to put the picture in order, to say what happened in the story. Okay. Now, what direction do you think people put the pictures in America? Yeah, left to right. Okay. What about in Israel? What do you think happened? Right to left. Good. Why? Yeah, because of the alphabet, exactly. The alphabet in Israel, the Hebrew alphabet, is read right to left. What happened in Australia with the Aboriginal people? Down, top down, no. Keep guessing. No, not circular. No. Okay. North to south. It doesn't matter what direction that they were, but basically in Australia, in Aboriginal languages, there is no word for left and right. Australian Aboriginal languages are what we call geocentric languages, which means every speaker instantly knows where is north, where is south, where is east, where is west. So when they laid out the story, that was the direction in which they laid them out. So that just gives you another idea of just how important it is to speak different languages to have different perspectives. Speaking languages change your mind, change your world, and I know that we're running out of time a little bit, and I could honestly talk about this for ages. I'm just going to go through this a little bit more quickly. Speaking languages gave me the courage to move to a completely new country. If I'd never done it, I would never have come to Hungary, and I would never have had the amazing experiences that I've had in Budapest living in this amazing city. Meeting so many people from all around the world, as I have by learning languages, has given me a lot of confidence in myself and also really improved my social skills. These are really positive things that I've taken and can apply to the rest of my life. Speaking languages has given me amazing job opportunities, and it has also allowed me to work anywhere I want, which is what I do at the moment by teaching online, which is something which is becoming bigger and growing in a really great way to live your life. But there's also other really important factors. For example, anybody who learns or speaks another language at any point in their life has now been shown by scientists to delay dementia by 4.5 years. That means that if your your DNA says you will get dementia age 80, if you learn another language, you will get it at 84.5, which is pretty amazing. The other thing is that learning languages is a really great way to fight depression and other mental health problems. There are a lot of really inspiring stories about people who overcame this by learning another language. So another example of just how important languages are for the brain. So as we've talked a lot about why, but now I think it's time to talk a little bit about how. Okay, so the point is, when I first started learning languages, I didn't achieve what I have achieved now overnight. It was not a very quick process, and I was not very good at it. But because I had such a clear idea of the fact that I wanted to speak a lot of languages, I thought it would be amazing to be able to speak to all these people all over the world, and I had some very inspiring people in my family who spoke 4 or 5 languages, I knew that I wanted to keep going. Now, the important thing as well for me is that even though I had an idea about the long-term picture, what I wanted to achieve, I went there by making small steps. I thought about things like, okay, by this summer, I want to be able to order food in Hebrew. By Christmas, I want to be able to write a letter to my aunt in French. Things like that really kept me going and really helped me to build up. Okay, because as you learn more languages, it only gets easier. You discover better how you learn, you discover more about your learning techniques, what works, what doesn't, so everything speeds up. But the important thing is that learning languages can and should be about having fun. Even though, it sounds like it may be a lot of hard work, there are plenty of ways actually to learn languages without even realizing it. Okay. I think this is also, I like this one. Don't make your life about learning languages, make learning languages about your life. What I mean by that is that everything that you should be doing should be relevant. You should have an idea about what you want to use your languages for, what your interests are, how you're going to be able to use your languages, and find ways to study using those things. But another big question is when. Someone at the last Polyglot conference in Novi Sad, one of the interpreters, she came up to me and she said, have you done anything else in your life at all apart from learn languages? And I said, of course. Of course I have a very normal life. Because the fact is, I don't believe that this has to be something all-encompassing. Like I said, make learning languages about your life. Don't make your life about learning languages. So, for example, one thing that I always do is I find ways to learn languages or practice languages while I'm doing completely other things. So, for example, when I'm driving, I will have the radio on in a different language. When I'm cooking, I'll maybe follow a recipe in a different language. And just before I go to sleep, I'll listen to the radio. One thing that I've done recently is that every time I watch TV, I make myself use subtitles in a foreign language so that I'm constantly practicing using new vocabulary and that kind of thing. Even thinking about 10 languages for 10 minutes a day is better than nothing. That means that when you're on the bus, even if you just think, how much of what I can see can I describe? How much of what I want to do can I do in another language? It's a way of practicing, and it's a way of using time that otherwise, you would maybe spend looking at your Facebook, looking at your Twitter, and really using every minute you have to make sure that you can achieve your goals. I really believe that things add up. So I think small steps, small stages, small bursts of studying over a long period of time are far better than studying for 3 hours at a time. So if you study for 5 minutes each day, make a note of it, write it down, and then at the end of the month, see how much you've actually done. See how much time you've been able to devote to languages without even realizing it and without even changing what you do every day. One really important thing about people who speak a lot of languages is that they speak well. This is something that I've noticed. They get very good at doing what they need to do. So the rule number one is that you don't need to know every word in the language in order to be understood, in order to have a conversation. You should be getting used to getting creative. Use words that you do know to describe words that you don't. So for example, maybe I don't know the word in Spanish for fingernail, but I know finger and I know end. So if I'm talking to a native speaker, I can say, the end of my finger here, and they will go, oh, of course, you mean uña, which means fingernail, and then there you go, you've learned a new word. A really important thing as well is that mistakes are your friend. Mistakes are an amazing way to learn languages. It's very, very memorable when you make a mistake because maybe the other person laughs, there's some reaction, and you remember exactly what that mistake is, and you should try to learn what you should say to make it better. At school, we're always told mistakes are bad. I think the opposite. Mistakes are great. I also think that if you want a lot of confidence at the beginning, work on your accent to sound good. Sound like you want to, sound like you are much better at speaking than you are, and then you will feel better and you will want to use the language better as well. But the most important thing is that you have to find ways to speak. You have to find ways to use your language in order to really be successful. Like I say, learning a language is only useful if you can speak it or use it. So basically, you should be finding ways to practice with native speakers or with other learners. So for example, meetup.com is a great thing to meet people near you, or if you don't live in a city which has a lot of expatriates or foreigners living there, then of course nowadays, the age of the internet, like right now you're in this webinar, you could also set up a Skype exchange partner via italki, find very cheap teachers, anything that basically just forces you maybe for even just an hour a week to speak and use the language, get feedback and see how you're doing. If you can't do that, then other really great things to do is to join Facebook groups, read blogs, join forums, and of course tweets to practice writing and using your language. Chances are that you will also meet interesting people with similar interests there that one day you could even use the language with. Set goals and work towards them. Motivation is so important for learning new languages. And of course, we all have times where we feel like we can't do it. Write down 10 reasons why you want to speak your language. And then when you have those moments of doubt, those moments where you feel, what am I doing here? Read them. Go through them again and remind yourself what you've done. Then set yourself small goals at first, like I was saying, I want to be able to order my food, and then go towards the larger thing. Maybe you can even think about your goals not being anything to do with language learning. Maybe, for example, I just want to go to Berlin for a week and have fun. And then while I'm there, I also want to be able to do some things in German. That's a really nice goal to aim for, and from that you can keep going and you can become more fluent. And the number one thing that you should remember is that everybody finds language learning hard sometimes. Even me. If ever you have a problem, if ever you feel like you've hit a brick wall, don't worry, we all do. There are ways around it that by talking to other language learners, by coming to events like this, you can solve. Thank you very much for the presentation. I talked a little bit more than I had hoped to. So if there are any questions now, it would be great if you could write them in the question box. Here are also some links that you can find to get hold of me, and then we could just have a few minutes to talk about them. Have I tried Polish? J.I.R. Tolkien gave up. I have looked at Polish. I grew up in West London at a time when there were a lot of people from Poland living there, so it was a language I heard every day. However, it's not one that I've managed to learn yet. I love Polish, I love Poland, and because I've studied some Russian, I've studied some Serbian, it's easy for me to follow it. So one day, definitely, I will learn it, but for now, it's not happened, but one day. Okay. Can you write in every language you learn? Yes, I always think it's important to learn to write in the language. And actually, one thing that you can do while you're learning is to practice writing, write out exercises, because you want to be able to use this language also to send emails. Writing is very important nowadays on Facebook, on Twitter, so it's a skill that you need. I also think that it helps to produce language as well as just, understand it. You need to be making it. And if you don't have someone there that you can speak to, writing a paragraph and then sending it to someone a week later to look is a really good way to get feedback. Okay, we've got some questions coming in now. Which language was the most difficult? Hungarian has been very, very difficult. There's been a lot of issues to do with that. I write about this on my blog, rawlings.com. You can read about that. Russian was also very difficult, but I got over it. Are you planning to visit Ukraine? I would love to visit Ukraine. I hoped I would be able to come this year, but it didn't quite happen because it's a long way by train, so I would have to fly, but one day definitely. Was there a language you tried to learn but not managed to? Yes, there have been plenty of languages where it just hasn't quite been right, where I haven't gone about it the right way, and I need to plan properly to do it. Arabic was one of those languages which I thought I would be able to do, but Arabic is a language that requires a lot of study, so I'm planning to come back to that later. Slovenian, maybe. Did you try to learn Japanese or Korean? I looked at Japanese because my father lived in Japan. However, it's very difficult for me to actually speak that language because I don't have people around me that I can use it with. So there are other languages that would make more sense to learn first, like, for example, Polish, where I know a lot of people from Poland and I visit Poland very often. So once the opportunity is there, I will learn it. Do you use any apps? Yes, I use things like Memrise. I haven't used much Anki, and I don't use Duolingo. I think it's important with these apps. They can be very, very useful, but they're not instead of language learning. They are in addition to language learning. So I still make all of my notes by hand. You'll be able to see I have all sorts of notes all over my desk for things that I write, and I use those apps just to make it easier to learn. I don't replace it because sometimes you can use them too much and it can be like procrastination. Which language was the easiest? Afrikaans is a very easy language if you're an English speaker because grammar is very simple. What about Switzerland? I've been there. Ich habe auch ein bisschen Deutsch gesprochen, aber leider nicht Schweizerdeutsch. How did you learn grammar? Grammar, I mean, this is a very complicated question, and actually we have a whole session dedicated to this at the Polyglot workshops, but basically exposure and practice is important. Free websites to learn, yes, but it depends on the language. So, for example, there's a very good free website to learn Afrikaans that I started with. Regularity is absolutely the key to learn any language. 10 minutes every day. Yes, it's nice in an ideal world. However, we're all human beings, and I as well sometimes don't manage to do 10 minutes every day. That's not the end of the world. The most important thing is just that you are doing it over time. So let's not think about every day. Let's think about how much I will do this month, next month, this year. How long have you learned Russian language? For just under 5 years, so 4.5 years I started learning. Have you had problems with other alphabets? It's difficult at first, but it gets easier. Okay, we have a lot of questions coming in, but we are unfortunately out of time. Like I said, this was only half hour, so thank you very much for coming. Before you go, I'd like to remind you that I'm coming to Warsaw at the end of next weekend, where I will be giving some workshops. If you would like to come, I would love to see you there, and I'm going to explain to you how you can sign up. Go to this site, polyglotworkshops.com, where you'll see this nice picture of me and Richard. Scroll down, and you'll be able to click Buy Now, and I will send you the link to that now. We have already sold out of seats for Saturday, but there are still some going for Sunday. So if you'd like to come, we can have all of these conversations in much more detail, talk much more about your experiences and your goals as well, and we get to spend a whole day together uninterrupted. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and see you next time.